Morant with a running start. Elevate! Dunks! Oh my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. On today's episode, I'm going to go over my observations and analysis of the things that I heard at Media Day. We heard from Zach Kleiman and Taylor Jenkins and all the players. So I'm going to go over all of that good stuff on today's episode. Before I do, just a reminder, if you want to play fantasy basketball with me and other listeners, if you want to play in my negative fantasy league, the signups are now open at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. If you sign up over there, not only can you play fantasy basketball with me and other listeners, you help support this independent Grizzlies podcast. You also get access to the listener Slack channel, and you get an exclusive monthly bonus episode. So check that out, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. Media days are generally a lot of fun. The reason they exist, I believe, is to, one, get just the team into the news cycle, get stuff for people to write about, to build excitement for the season. They also just work as like that, like a pep rally to get the fan base engaged and optimistic about the team. Also, it serves to make all the players just more endearing, and I think that was very successful. If you watched all the player interviews, which I did on YouTube, you just get a good sense of these guys. You feel like, all right, these are some solid fellas. I like cheering for them. So that part of Media Day, every fan base gets that basically, where every player is like, listen, we worked hard all summer. We've been in here working out. The young guys look great. And it's all this kind of build up towards the season. And frankly, none of it means a whole lot. I think maybe we can glean some like central thesis for the attitude of the team. I think if you take away anything real from what the players said, it was just that last year, of course, was very disappointing. Many of them said things like they were humbled. It lets you know not to take things for granted. So they've been maybe extra motivated this offseason. But again, reminder, every NBA player is motivated every offseason. But there were, I think, some interesting and important things, bits of information that we did not have beforehand. And I think I'll start with Zach Kleiman. He was the first person to address the media, and there were legitimate questions from those in attendance about the Grizzlies offseason. And the first question was from DeMichael Cole, and he asked about the offseason, and the focus, where it seemed to be the focus of the offseason, was staying under the luxury tax. And DeMichael, to his credit, asked a relatively direct question, said it seemed like that was the focus of the offseason, and if that was the case, why was that the case? Well, then Zach Kleiman gave an answer that was not that direct. It was kind of long and winding, and there's a lot to pull out of it. But he essentially said, if I understood him correctly, he essentially said, starting at last year's trade deadline, they understood what the direction the team was going to go. And just that statement, for me, I've pondered it for a while. Honestly, I probably need to talk to somebody else just to bounce ideas off of to figure out exactly what it means. After thinking about it for almost a day, I guess mainly I want to know, does that mean at last year's trade deadline, they realized that they needed to move Steven Adams because they knew they weren't going to pay the luxury tax this season? Like, is that what he meant? I don't know if that's what he meant. He said last year's trade deadline, Zach Kleiman said last year's trade deadline gave the team clarity about how they were going to build their roster. So there are a contender this year and in future seasons. Whenever you get in the future seasons talk, I always take that as sort of like an excuse for not spending. Of course, we do want them to keep an eye on the future and not do any short-sighted moves. But the clarity that Kleiman said he got at the trade deadline last year and how that carried over into what they were going to do this offseason just made me a little bit confused. He used the word flexibility, and maybe he was just talking about moving on from David Roddy and Steven Adams and Xavier Tillman, giving, again, more roster flexibility so you could do different things to build around your core. But I didn't know exactly how that tied in to the luxury tax situation, unless he was talking about Steven Adams or something else. I mean, maybe they were trying to make a big trade at last year's trade deadline. And then when that didn't happen, they were like, I now have clarity. We're going to get rid of Zaire Williams. We're not going to sign any players this offseason. We're going to rebuild through the draft. Like he said, he knew they needed, a center. And we've talked about this before. Going into the offseason, they were very clear that they identified we have to find a center. And Zach at Media Day said they were trying to find a difference maker at the center position. But again, that goes to my question. Did he mean they understood that Steven Adams, health questions with Steven Adams played a big part of it, I think. But the clarity on not going to the luxury tax this offseason, was that based on, all right, look at our salary sheet. We would like to keep Luke Kennard. We know we have Jaren and Dez and Marcus, and we're going to keep Brandon. So we're running out of salary cap space or space on the luxury tax line. So we're not going to keep Steven Adams. That's the clarity. We have to find a cheaper replacement for that. Maybe I'm misreading this or not interpreting those comments correctly. Zach kept saying, so the flexibility and then the offseason and every offseason has been built or has been focused on building around their core of Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Zach said that he thinks that's maybe the best big three in the NBA, but what they've done this offseason is try to find the best fit around those three players to build a championship contender. And he says that they have done that, saying that he feels like the roster as it is right now is a championship contender. He says that they still have their assets to make future moves, but it kind of sounded like he said, all right, we got some flexibility and we have built a championship contender and we're excited about all the pieces we have around Ja, Desmond, and Jaren. The follow-up question that I wish someone had asked, the thing I wanted to hear, was a question asking, why is staying beneath the luxury tax line and not adding any players with NBA experience after losing several of them? Why is that the best way to surround this core to build a championship contender? I don't know the answer. I have my own opinions, but that part of it I thought was intriguing. Again, Zach Kleiman started with, I felt like he came up with something he wanted to say beforehand, and it had something to do with the trade deadline, but I didn't totally understand what it meant, and unfortunately, we got no follow-up questions. I do think the most interesting thing, maybe that Zach said outside of that, or something I appreciated the response, was about how he wants to see what they have. I think that's the quote. Wants to see what we have, which is something we've talked about a lot. They did not see what they have with Ja and Desmond and Jaren and Marcus Smart all playing together. And they want to be thoughtful about the moves they make, the decisions they make, because they want to see what they have before they do maybe anything more extreme. He also said that Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. were at the beginnings of their primes. It felt like he very specifically spelled out that he thought they were at the beginnings of their primes, which is interesting. I don't have any pushback to that. I wonder if that's just a thoughtful decision that the front office has made when they build this roster, when they think about the multi-year plan to build a contender in Memphis. Had they identified hey, age 25, that's when the prime starts? Are they thinking of this season as the beginning of a championship window? Are they not thinking of like the previous years? I maybe feel like our window has been open longer than we knew. The window was open back in 2022. Like, maybe not. But I thought that was interesting how Zach said a couple of times that they are, that Ja and Desmond and Jaren are at the beginning of their primes. So I think the basic recap of Zach Kleiman, it was an optimistic take saying that the team is the championship contender, that Ja and Desmond and Jaren are one of the top 3-man cores in the NBA, if not the top, which is what he said. And then saying they are ready to win a championship. And like Desmond Bane said something similar. He's like 100%. The goal is to win the championship this season, and he thinks that's something they can do. Other things that Zach Kleiman said, he let us know that the Derrick Rose retirement was in fact completely out of the blue. He said he was surprised by this. Follow-up question I wish someone had asked. If you knew Derrick Rose was going to retire in June, if you'd been given that information in June, what, if anything, would have been different about this offseason? So I don't know the answer. I also really liked that Zach Kleiman said some things about the CBA that sounded like I was talking. He said, I think we have until the second week of the regular season to get a 14th player under contract. And that's basically the answer I came up with when I Googled it. Like, I don't know the answer. Refreshing to hear Zach Kleiman candidly say something to that effect. He also said the Grizzlies aren't allowed, or they could not sign another training camp deal after Derrick Rose's retirement, because you can't have the full 21 players at training camp if you only have 13 standard contracts. If they wanted to add another body for training camp, they would have to add someone to a guaranteed deal. So I thought that was interesting. So there's only going to be 20 players at training camp. The reason that rule exists, of course, it's to force the teams to spend money. You're not allowed to only have 13 guaranteed contracts, 3 two-ways, and 5 training camp deals. No. You have to pay for standard contract NBA players. So the recap for me of what Zach Kleiman said, none of it bothered me at all. I was just mainly curious about the trade deadline comment from last season, and then I want to know more clarity, again, about why dodging the luxury tax this season was the best way to build around the core, even if you consider a long-term championship window. Because the recap from last year's trade deadline, Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman, David Roddy, Zaire Williams, and Derrick Rose are all gone from the team that was at last year's trade deadline, and those players have been replaced by 3 rookies. Zach Edey, who we're all excited about, Jalen Wells, also excited about, and Cam Spencer. By the way, Zach Kleiman said Cam Spencer also injured. He has a moderately sprained ankle, so it sounds like he's going to miss training camp as well. Now, as far as the rest of the stuff, I'm going to blow through a lot of this stuff because it's not that important or illuminating in my opinion. Taylor Jenkins, I found the most interesting thing he said was he plainly stated that Tomas Isola is the lead assistant and would be in charge of the offense. The lead assistant thing was initially reported when the news about Isola coming to the team broke, but then in my memory, it had been walked back. So I thought that was interesting to hear plainly about Tomas's role on the coaching staff and that he is the lead assistant. Scottie Pippen Jr. said that he'd been told that he, in fact, is trying out for the final roster spot, or for the 14th roster spot. It's definitely not the final one they could use. That training camp is going to be an opportunity, he's been told by the front office, to earn that spot. Also, Zach Kleiman said they would probably add a 14th guy before opening night, but don't hold him to that. Vince Williams Jr. said he wanted to make the all-defensive team this season, says he's been watching film of Marcus Smart, early Patrick Beverley, and Drew Holiday to teach him what to do. He says he loves trying to guard, or he just loves going up against Ja Morant and Desmond Bane in offseason pickup runs. Luke Kennard said there's an urgency for this team, that maybe they're more locked in than ever before. That's your cliche warning. That's what everyone says. But again, he cited the fact that last year, again, very upsetting, disappointing season. So they've all been working out and playing together this offseason for a while. Ja Morant and Jaren, I don't know if anything important about the team was said from those guys. The most important thing to me, though, was Jaren's just honest and heartfelt response to a question about Dikembe Mutombo. It's the most moving part of all of Media Day. I mean, the highlight of Media Day is this funny story about John Conchar pranking Jalen Wells, going up to Jalen Wells and having a picture taken with him where John Conchar did not say who he was, and Jalen Wells did not know that John Conchar was on the Grizzlies. So that's a funny story. Go check it out on social media. But the most, I think, meaningful moment of Media Day was Jaren Jackson Jr. being asked about Dikembe Mutombo and then answering it kind of briefly, and then being asked another question about, like, how is your defense going to be better this season with Zach Edey, playing alongside Zach Edey? And then Jaren thought for a minute and went back to the Dikembe Mutombo question and just talked about Dikembe and their relationship. Dikembe Mutombo was Jaren's father's roommate at Georgetown. So again, go check that out on YouTube. Go look at Jaren's Media Day availability for that moment. Marcus Smart, I mean, he's a veteran, said all the right things. He was very complimentary of Scottie Pippen Jr. He also identified Jake LaRavia as a player who could step up when Marcus is not in the game as one of the better perimeter defenders. That's very interesting. John Conchar, beyond telling the story about pranking Jalen Wells, said, in his opinion, this is the most talented roster that the Grizzlies have had since he's been here. He also said his goal is to shoot 38% from three. Brandon Clark's big soundbite, I think it was him saying that the players felt like losers last year. That was very notable. And then beyond that, I don't think there's anything more that I need to relate to you guys. I'm going through my notes after watching every one of these things on YouTube. I love that it's all available on YouTube. You can go check it out. You can go watch every bit of Media Day there and hear all of these answers. I mean, the team talked a lot, I guess, about the offense being unique and what the new coaches are going to be. I don't really believe, I guess I'm a skeptic when it comes to our offense is going to look unique. Like, it's NBA basketball. I don't know if anyone is reinventing the wheel. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. Maybe it will be totally unique, but a big challenge for the Grizzlies this season, of course, is going to be being a better half-court offensive team specifically, not just winning the possession battle by forcing turnovers and getting offensive rebounds. They need to be a better half-court team. That is the stated goal. That's why they turned over so much of the coaching staff. And with that, I think I will wrap up today's brief update, going over what the Grizzlies players and coaches and Zach Kleiman said at Media Day. Of course, the Grizzlies start training camp today in Nashville, Tennessee. I will be out there covering that. So if you want to support me as I do all this stuff, do it at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. If you already support me, go ahead and sign up for the fantasy basketball leagues. Anyways, thanks you guys for listening. Hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.